What's up fellow nerds, I'm your host Dr. McKay and welcome back to my channel. In this video I will be breaking down the last of the four great races, the Nox. The Nox are the last of the four great races I have yet to cover on my channel, and I will be covering their origins and history and their culture to the best of my ability, using information I have sourced from these various sources on screen now. But before we get started, if you like my content, feel free to like, comment and subscribe for more. And with that said, let's go. Right, before we get started, I want to clear up the timelines. So as you know, on my channel there is massive debate on the actual timeline of the Alliance of the Four Great Races, with many other events within the history of the Stargate universe. And with all the research I have done into this topic, I lean more towards the millions of years timeline over the 10,000 years timeline. However, if you disagree with this millions of years timeline, just change my timestamps in this video to fit into the 10,000 years timeline. So with all the timelines sorted out, let's begin. The origins of the Nox take place tens of millions of years ago on their home planet of Gaia in the Milky Way galaxy. They evolved like all species on their planet over millions of years, from single-celled organisms to complex life. Their appearance is much like that of humans, although smaller on average than humans. They also have faint grey skin with grass-like hair from which branches and leaves can grow. They reached a level of sentience and formed a civilization which eventually led to space travel. It's unclear on their cultural development during their early days of their civilization and the early days of leaving their planet, but one can presume they was of a peaceful mindset, exploring space slowly and developing and understanding science. However, being native to the Milky Way galaxy, they were one of, if not one of the first advanced races to develop within the Milky Way galaxy, and thus they began to explore space relatively alone and unchallenged. The Nox spent many years exploring space at a steady pace, not encountering much life until encountering the Alterans around 8 million years ago, and due to the Nox being sufficiently advanced enough for formal contact, the Alterans along with the Asgard formed an alliance with the Nox. This happened shortly after the Alterans encountered and allied themselves with the Furlings, and after the Nox was brought into the alliance, the four races formally created a joint alliance, and thus from then on became known to the galaxy as the Alliance of the Four Great Races. The group shared their knowledge and culture amongst each member of the alliance, and shared limited technology with each member. The Alterans gave the Nox a Stargate and access to the Gate network for easier travel amongst planets in the alliance, and the Asgard would share their various data of explored space. The alliance was one of mutual sharing and understanding of the universe, and thus they decided to create a neutral place to gather and share knowledge and discuss events of the galaxy. The project was led by the Asgard, but all races had involvements in the construction of this meeting place called Heliopolis. The alliance would trade knowledge and technology for around 1 million years, learning much from each other, and with the Nox more advanced physiology and symbiotic relationship with nature, they shared much of their spiritual nature with the alliance, mainly about their connection to the bioelectrical energy fields of all living things and the universe, which possibly led the Alterans to discover the path of ascension. But that's my own theory. The Nox participated in all matters of the Alliance and took the stance that all life matters, no matter who or what it is. And with the Nox understanding of the energy fields of all living things in the universe, it was due to this that they were opposed to all forms of violence and conflict, even in self-defense, and choosing to allow freedom of choice regardless of the choices made, except for any choices that include violence, which they would be compelled to disarm rather than to harm. They would also feel obligated to aid both sides of a conflict to preserve all life. This was a fundamental part of the Nox's ideals, and around 7.5 million years ago, when the plague hit the Alteran population, the Nox was appalled at the Alterans' plan to cleanse the galaxy of the plague, killing and destroying so much life to start again, even if this was the right thing to do. The Nox, unable to convince the Alterans of another way, they could not accept the Alterans' plan, or be a part of it, due to their ideals. They removed themselves from the Alliance and isolated themselves on their home world of Gaia, and waited for the plan to be enacted. The Alterans fired the weapon at Dakara, cleansing the plague from the galaxy, and with the Nox heightened perception of the bioelectrical fields of all life, they felt the loss of life energy in the galaxy, and it drove them to become isolationists to the extreme, focusing on their homeworld. They buried their starships in underground hangars and abandoned the galaxy, hiding away. They would spend the next 7.5 million years alone, focusing on their symbiotic relationship with nature, mainly their planet's forests. And due to this, they began to stall technologically. Although still highly advanced, they focused more on being one with nature over advances in science. With the Alliance over and the Nox isolated on their homeworld, they remained, never leaving to venture out in the galaxy again. They became lost and forgotten to the galaxy, except from the Asgard and the Furlings, and over the millennia, no one knew the Nox even existed. So when the Stargate activated on Gaia for the first time in millions of years, the Nox, from the shadows of their cloaking ability, watched as a group of Unus came through the Stargate and began to explore. The Nox watched on as the Unus group found nothing of interest and returned through the Stargate. The Nox remained hidden through this contact, but curious of the visitors. Many years would go by and another group of Unus would arrive through the Stargate, this time with advanced weapons. The Nox watched on from the safety of their cloak and saw these Unus begin to hunt the Fenrir, a flying creature on Gaia. The Nox quickly cloaked the Fenrir to save it from harm. However, this piqued the interest of the Unus, as they now wanted to capture the Fenrir to study it. However, after a while, the Unus gave up the hunt and left via the Stargate. The Nox still remain hidden through this contact, and their actions to save the Fenrir have drawn the attention of the Goa'uld, and over the next 10,000 years of Goa'uld expansion, every so often a hunting party would come through the Stargate in an attempt to capture the Fenrir, to discover its cloaking ability. The Nox would conceal themselves and the Fenrir every time and just wait for the Goa'uld to leave. The Goa'uld would at times send ships to Gaia, but the Nox can use their technology to cloak their entire planet, making the Goa'uld unable to find it, leaving just gate travel as the Goa'uld's only means of getting to Gaia. This trend would continue on and off over the centuries until one day in 1997 AD, a new group of humans came through the Stargate. It was SG-1. The Nox, seeing non-Goa'uld humans using the Stargate with primitive weapons, piqued their curiosity. They immediately cloaked the Stargate and SG-1's gear and watched SG-1 closely. SG-1 came to Gaia for the same reason as the Goa'uld, to hunt the Fenrir. But as SG-1 was exploring, they encountered the Goa'uld System Lord Apophis and his personal Jafar guard. SG-1, not wanting to miss this opportunity, laid an ambush for Apophis and strike first. Apophis would ultimately take the upper hand in the skirmish and kill SG-1, except Tilk. And in those moments, the Nox, not wanting any violence, stepped in and whisked SG-1 away, including the slain Jafar that was killed by Tilk, and brought them to their little village in the forest. Once there, the Nox brought back to life SG-1 and the Jafar using their healing ceremony, where they can manipulate the living bioelectrical energy of life, reviving SG-1 from death. The Nox would remove SG-1's weapons and reveal themselves to them and explain who they were, leaving out much information like their technology and abilities, leaving SG-1 to believe the Nox to be weak and helpless. The Nox called SG-1 young and explained their ways to them. SG-1, fearing that Apophis would track down and harm the Nox, they urged the Nox to fight back, or to at least defend themselves. But the Nox refused, explaining it's not their way, and that SG-1's way is not the only way, and that the Nox ways have served them for as long as their people have lived. In the ensuing events, 2 of the Nox would be killed and revived, and Apophis and his Jafar would be removed by the Nox, leaving SG-1 frustrated and relieved at the same time. SG-1 returned to where the Stargate was and was greeted by the Nox, who wished to bid them farewell, and says to SG-1 that once SG-1 leaves, they will bury their Stargate so no one can return. SG-1 protests this, saying the gold will return in ships. The Nox, intrigued, asked SG-1, "You fear for us, why?" Teal'c replied, "It is our way. The strong defend the weak." The Nox smiles, then says, "Fear not," and reveals a massive floating city in the distance, revealing to SG-1 that they can take care of themselves, and that the Nox were not as helpless after all. The Nox final words to SG-1 says he hopes that one day they will learn that their way is not the only way, and disappears from sight. SG-1 stands and contemplates and reflects on what they have just seen, and O'Neill says, "The very young do not always do as they are told." SG-1 then leaves Gaia behind, and the Nox bury their Stargate. A year goes by since Nox said farewell to SG-1 on their planet, and out of nowhere, the Nox receive a signal from Earth for help. The Nox send Laia, one of the Nox who encountered SG-1 previously. They send her through the Stargate to Earth, where Daniel is with the Tolan, a group of advanced humans they rescued on a planet. And Daniel asks Laia to help the Tolan reach their new homeworld. And in that moment, Harry Mayborn, not wanting to give up the Tolan, threatens to have the guards in the gate room open fire to stop the Tolan leaving. Laia removes the guards' weapons and says, "Your race has learned nothing," but then looks at Daniel and says, "But you have." She then activates the Stargate with a gesture, and the Tolan disappear through the gate. And then Laia nods and then walks through. The Nox would assist the Tolan in finding their new homeworld, but it's unclear if it was by ship or Stargate, as the Tolan's new Stargate was created jointly by both the Nox and the Tolan, leading me to believe that the Nox ferried the Tolan refugees to Tulana and then helped construct a new Stargate for them before returning back to Gaia. Later on, the Nox in the year 2000 would be asked to aid in Triad, a Tolan's court of proceedings regarding the fate of Skara and Chlorel, as a non-biased neutral voice. SG-1 would be there to argue for Skara as the rightful owner of the body, as he was born to it and did not steal and take over it by force, and a Goa'uld called Zimpakna would argue for Chlorel to own and control the body, saying that the Goa'uld are the superior species and have the right to the body, like humans have rights to keep livestock, to breed and cull for food, being the superior race. The Nox representative, in this case Laia, would argue both points, but ultimately side with Skara, declaring if Skara lives, Chlorel will still live, and yet if Chlorel wins, Skara's conscious life will come to an end, as the symbiote completely suffocates the host's mind, along with his free will, and this does not count as life in itself. She rules for Skara to have control of his body, and with that judgment, the Goa'uld, not happy with this, and a part of the Goa'uld's plan from the start, orders a Huttuk in orbit to fire its weapons, destroying the Tolan ion cannons. However, Teal'c approached Laia, the Nox, earlier with concern of this, and asked her to hide one of the cannons, which she did. Teal'c would then use this cannon to destroy the Huttuk and save the day. Samantha Carter said to Laia, though, "I thought the Nox were pacifists," which Laia replied, "I only hid the weapon, I did not fire it," which was a pretty fine line she didn't cross. Laia would part ways with SG-1 and the Tolans, and the Nox were never seen again within the show's runtime, and the Nox would remain isolationists through all of Galactic Affairs going forward within the show's runtime, which includes all of the events of the Goa'uld's downfall and the Ori invasion. So, in some of the extended materials I have found online while researching this video, the Nox, after the events on Tolana with the Triad, Laia would go back to Gaia and argue with the Nox ruling council to rejoin the galaxy and participate in galactic affairs. The Nox would debate this for the many years ahead on whether they should rejoin the galaxy or not, but after the Tauri destroyed the Ori and used the Ark of Truth on the remaining Ori followers, some of the Ori followers after this event still felt like they should follow the Ori, and now they are in control of highly advanced starships. They began to attack the galaxy, including Earth. Earth sent out a distress call for anyone to help aid them in the fight. The Nox Laia, picking up on this distress call, went before the Council of Nox and urged them to aid the galaxy. With the Nox seeing no other way, not seeing any other choice but to help, they fired up their ancestral starships to aid the Tauri and the galaxy in stopping the followers of the Ori's crusade. They engaged in the battles with the Ori followers and helped bring peace back to the galaxy once more. The Nox, playing such a critical role in the final days of the war with the Ori followers, was asked to join a new alliance of races by the Tauri, who have been given the title of the fifth race by the late Asgard. The Nox would accept this alliance and join a new great alliance of races, comprised of the Tauri, the Free Jafar Nation, the Tok'ra, the Nox, and, this is going to be hard guys, the Hebrideans, basically the species that was in the space race. Alright, these 5 races would create a new Heliopolis and begin to work together for the betterment of the galaxy and all its people. But this is an extended story, and as far as I'm aware, this is not canon. But in my opinion, this is a really great way for the Nox to rejoin the galaxy. But what are your thoughts on this extended story? Well, there you go, my fellow nerds. This concludes my breakdown of the Nox's history and completes the breakdowns for all 4 of the great races within the Stargate universe. I started this mini-series with a full history breakdown of the Ancients, then I continued the coverage moving on to the Asgard, then the Furlings, and now the Nox. In these breakdowns, I have tried to create a coherent timeline of events to fit in with each race and the overall history of the Stargate universe. And while there is many holes and contradictions riddled throughout the lore, I gave it my best shot to make it all work and make sense to you all. And I think I have done the best I can. So I thank you all for your continued support on this channel with all of your amazing comments. I love reading each and every one of them. But before I go, here are my final thoughts on the Nox. The Nox are a very unique race that are highly advanced technologically, but are one with nature, sharing a symbiotic relationship with the universe, a uniqueness rarely seen in sci-fi. They are the last of the 4 great races left still strong within the Milky Way galaxy and have great potential to be a great force of good within the galaxy in future stories. They only appeared in 3 episodes in the show, and each time I was captivated by them, wanting to see more, especially of their interactions with the Great Alliance, like the Asgard or the Ancients, but also with the Tauri and the Tok'ra. They are still quite a mystery of a race, even though we know far more about them than the Furlings. There is so much more we don't know, but that is the fun of Stargate. It allows us, the fans, to imagine different stories and form our own ideas, and that is what makes Stargate my favourite sci-fi show. Out of all of them, there is. Well, those are my thoughts on the Nox. What are your thoughts? Please leave a comment below with them. And if you enjoyed the content and you want to see more like this, please feel free to like, comment and subscribe for more. Your support of this channel is greatly appreciated and helps me bring out more content on a regular basis. So thank you all for your continued support. And with that said, I've been Dr. McKay. Thank you all for watching this breakdown of the Nox and the final of the 4 of the great and the final breakdown of the 4 great races. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Cheers and goodbye, and have a good rest of your day. Bye!